All right, Penny, thank you so much
Hello.
hello, there we go. Penny,
Yay.
Kelly, I'm going to hand you over to Tom Needham, our moderator, and I'm going to run around the audience with the mic in case anyone has any questions for you. So
Sounds
I'm
great.
going to hand it over to Tom Needham. Tom, why don't you say hello to Penny here?
Hi, Penny. How you doing?
Hello. I'm good. Thank you. I'm sorry I can't be there in person.
Well, it was a wonderful film, and I want to thank you so much for joining us this evening. One of the things that you said near the beginning of the film, which I thought was interesting, was how you were so concerned that some people may ask you or did ask you, were you making this film? It was donating of the kidney just a way to make a movie. Can you explain a little bit about why that was so concerning to you?
Yeah, good question. I mean, in some ways, I guess my concern was that the whole decision to donate was already something that I think people had a hard time understanding. And I think I knew without anyone saying anything that like, wow, this person really wants attention, like might be one of the reasons that people thought I was doing it. And then I thought if I was doing it to make a film, it would be like that times 20. Like, oh, she really wants attention. And so I think I was just worried that it would seem narcissistic, to be frank, but like the whole thing. So it didn't really matter ultimately. Like I even said that in the film, like who cares? But for whatever reason, I was very concerned that people know that I was like going to give a kidney and then later decided to make a film. Maybe it's just like a random neurosis of my own. And there's no really good reason for it. I can't hear anything right now, but I'm looking at a very cute picture of a cat. Oh, hello, 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 hello. Oh no, I think you've lost me. I don't hear anything. I don't see anything. Wait, I'm looking at my texts now. No, no texts.
Why don't we-
Hello, I just heard something.
Hello, Penny.
Hello.
I'm sorry for that. We had a technical problem. We lost your, but you're
Oh
back.
no. Okay, I'm back.
Thanks for sticking with us. So, one of the things that I think everyone appreciates in this film is your honesty, going through the journey, and that you didn't make it just seem like it was always easy. Can you share a little bit about your decision to admit at times that it was scary, that it was difficult, that maybe it wasn't everything you thought it was going to be?
Yeah, I mean, I think that if to go back to the last question, if I hadn't been making this film, I wouldn't necessarily have dwelled on those things. I don't think. I think I would have probably been too embarrassed to tell just like social acquaintances any of the stuff that I told people in the film. Because I was making the film, I like was forced to look for the complexity and I was forced to look for the drama, really. And I'm not sure that was like great for my experience of donating, but it was what I had to do to make the film. So yeah, there was not really like a choice to be honest and vulnerable in the film. That was just kind of like built into the process. Like once I decided to do it, I knew I had to be honest and be vulnerable. And so I did my best to be both of those things.
in this film, you're doing a lot of things. You're telling your personal story. You're explaining what the process is like. You're giving a little history. Tell me what it was like with the editing in terms of how to break down all the different elements of this film into the
I
different.
mean, oh gosh, it was just like so hard, right? Like you can probably imagine. I mean, first of all, like I started it before my surgery, but not much before my surgery. So like I was really truly like coming right up on the surgery when I was like, okay, let's film some stuff and see if there might be a film here. Let's just do some stuff. It was kind of spontaneous, like sort of last minute. So then when I got into the edit, I realized that, you know, a big part of the story had happened before I picked up a camera, which is, by the way, like a classic documentary problem. Like every documentary has that problem because the only reason you knew to pick up the camera was that something interesting had already happened. Like it's a big problem. But in this case, I was like, how am I going to represent the whole part of the process that happened before we picked up cameras, which if you really are paying attention in the film, it's like 2/3 of the way into the film that we go to the hospital. Like that's the day I started filming, you know. Well, the first interview was a few days before that. Anyway, to make a long story short, the edit was long. It was, you know, at least 3 years, not like full-time editing. Maybe it was even more like 4 years. But you know, just kind of trying to figure out how to put the pieces together and like, you know, just I had too many ambitions for the film and I had to let go of some of them. I probably could have let go of some more. But like it really felt important to me that, you know, once I put myself in the film that I had to like take that seriously and like try to craft a character and try to craft a journey for that character and find ways for the audience to come along. So that ended up being about half the film, even though what I wanted was for it to be like 10% of the film, you know, and then trying to like find time and space to kind of balance that out with like the more philosophical questions I wanted to ask and the scientific questions and the scientific history that I wanted to cover. It was quite challenging to find that balance.
What were some of the more philosophical things that you wanted to explore that maybe you didn't get a chance to?
Well, there's a couple like big buckets, really. One was, you know, having to do with the idea of like my kind of Irish Catholic background and like whether without, I'm not like really a religious person. I think you see that in the film, but I think without even realizing it, I'd kind of grown up steeped in a culture that had certain attitudes about what a saint is and like what it means, what it takes to be a saint, you know, and the fact that like sort of saints are like better than the rest of us, you know? So there's something about that that I think I was trying to explore. I had a few scenes that were kind of more about that, but I didn't really think I needed them ultimately. And then some of the other things that I really wished I could have gotten more into were the policy stuff. Like there's basically like one scene in my film about policy, about like what should we do about the fact that there's this like incredible miracle technology, but not everyone has access to it. And, you know, there's an obesity epidemic. So there's like people, more and more people every year are needing kidneys, need donor kidneys. So I wish I mean, it was something I had spent a lot of time researching and like could have included, like that could have been a whole film though, right? Like that's a whole topic of its own. So I had to kind of like ultimately be okay with the idea that a couple of the big ideas I had at the beginning really became one scene in the film. And like it became like one topic on like a smorgasbord of other topics that you could like choose from to like go research more at your own leisure. I recommend everyone go learn about these things.
One of the topics that you introduced, I think, is the idea that some people believe that it would be good if you could be compensated for donating organs.
Yeah.
And it's a really interesting concept, being that we need more people to do it. It would help out those people that are doing it. It would compensate them. But there are some ethical issues. I was wondering, after going through this whole experience yourself, if your views have changed at all on this topic.
I would say my views have changed. I think that, you know, probably, you know, 5 years ago, I would have been pretty much just like, yeah, of course we should compensate people for donating the same way that in like, you know, surrogacy, and in like other areas of very intense, intimate bodily issues, we do find ways to compensate people, even while we call it something philanthropic, like you're donating your eggs. You're not really donating them, you're selling them. But we still maintain that language of like donation in that way. So I'm not saying that's what we should do. I'm not sure that's what we should do now. Like I feel like I've thought about it more and I'm just more attuned to like the sort of world of unintended consequences. Like, I don't think there's baseline ethical problems with the idea of compensating donors, but I do think that if we started compensating donors, it would change the landscape in ways that like I don't feel confident that I could predict. And so I just don't feel competent to like make policy recommendations. I do think I feel competent to say that, you know, if the average kidney donor in the United States is out about $4,000 in like lost wages and, you know, childcare and stuff like that, that like maybe we should at least just like compensate people for the money they lose doing this like good act. Like we could maybe just start with that. We don't even do that yet. So maybe we could start there. Like that'd be good.
One of the things that you did in the movie is you showed the study of the brain, and you actually even had your brain studied. And I'm seeing this in a lot of different areas in life. Some people are saying that maybe people are born with certain aspects that could make them have all kinds of different characteristics. You decided to deal with altruism, and I was wondering if you've come to believe that people are just born a certain way. Are you just born altruistic? Um, is it something that one should even deserve credit for? Just the way that they're born, or, you know, and people ask this about other characteristics as well.
Yeah. So we don't really know what kind of brain I was born with. We did a brain scan of me, you know, a couple of years ago, and I don't know whether I was like, you know, born with the exact same brain I have now in my 40s. I doubt it, right? So I don't think anyone would claim that like what these brain scans is proving is that some people are born certain ways and other people aren't. I think any neuroscientist would say there's a lot of different neural pathways that can get you, like very different neural pathways that can get you to the same outcome. And if that outcome is like, you know, doing an altruistic thing, then like it doesn't need to be through the amygdala. Like, so let me also put it this way, because it's really important that people get this. When we're talking about these differences and like, you know, amygdala size and amygdala activation amongst these different populations, we have to remind ourselves these are averages, right? Averages. This is not a brain test where you can like be like, oh, my amygdala is this big, therefore I'm this much of a psychopath. You know, it's an average. So there are people who have given kidneys to strangers that have smaller than average amygdalas, and there are psychopaths that have larger than average amygdalas. So it's just an average across populations. And so it doesn't really tell us anything about individuals, actually, you know? So it's kind of a MacGuffin. Like the whole thing I realized was kind of a MacGuffin in the structure of the film. Like going off to get my brain scanned is kind of framed as like this very active kind of like going on a journey to like understand altruism. And in the end, like you get these brain scans and literally it's like, take a sip of your La Croix because none of us know what to even say about this. Like, sounds good. Like my amygdala is kind of big. No idea like what to do with that information. Like,
You mentioned that you didn't like being on camera.
no.
And
Who likes
yet,
being on camera? Who are these psychopaths? Speaking of psychopaths.
so, I mean, you're a documentary filmmaker. You make people, you don't make people, but you ask people to be in films all the time. Now that you're the subject of your film, tell us what you've learned about what it's like to be in a movie, to have yourself so vulnerable, even to invite a camera team into the operating room.
I guess like maybe I am an empathetic person because it didn't like people always ask me this and I feel like the answer is supposed to be like, I learned more about how to empathize with their position, but nothing about the experience was particularly surprising to me about how invasive it is. Like, I think it's like, if anything, I had it way harder than my normal subjects because I'm also trying to like direct while we're shooting these scenes. And I'm like, there's no one else here to direct. And how do I direct if I'm not where I'm supposed to be? I will say that in the craft bucket of like conversations, like it was just so remarkably difficult to think of myself as a character. Like we're always like when you're taking a real person and you're turning them into a character, like even in a nonfiction context, you're still kind of turning them into a character that's kind of operating within a plot or a story that has certain conventions. And I've always been very aware of the weirdness of that Like I'm always very empathetic to like how weird it would be to be a real person with all of your 360, you know, complexity, with your whole history, with every thought you've ever had. And then some random person who barely knows you makes a bunch of decisions about like what they think is the most, and it must be so strange. So that didn't change, but I will say on a craft level, like I really understand now, like people who are able to make personal films as like their practice and just keep doing it are like talented in ways that I'm not, because it is so hard to have any perspective on anything, like when you're this much in it. And so I had to really rely on my creative collaborators, like just more than ever to be, I mean, I really had no idea. Like I didn't know like who is this Penny person and like what aspects of her biography are relevant. Like normally I'm doing an interview and like someone starts blabbering about their schizophrenic grandmother. And in my head, I'm like, oh, this is really important because blah, 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 or like it's definitely going in because of this. Or in my head, I'm like, just nod and smile because like you got to get through this boring story so that we can get to the thing that's important. When I'm sitting there monologuing about my schizophrenic grandmother, I have no capacity to know where I am in that. Like, I'm like, is this relevant? Is this interesting? I have no idea, like literally no idea. So I had to just generate like so much material of like myself blathering just to kind of give my editors a chance to like find something good to craft out of it.
And then do you just hand it over to them and step back, or are you
No,
pretty
no, of
much,
course
no?
not. No, because then you have the problem where you have total 100% access to your main character. So you can always go back to her and ask her for another take of this. So it was like this kind of, you never knew when to quit because, you know, there's a certain point where you're like, I can't keep asking my subject to like re-record lines for me. Like, you know, we got to call it a day. But when I'm the subject, oh man, I'm like the worst director ever.
There's people that you showed news clips of that have done this sort of thing, and people throughout time who have done this, who have hoped that maybe it would spark something and that more people would do it.
Yeah.
So I guess everyone here is probably wondering, now that this film has started to be seen by people, is it making a difference? Have you heard stories from people?
Oh yeah, totally. Like without a doubt, many. And that was before the film even came out. Like, you know, I mean, truly just like that's one of the things that makes me the most crazy. Like because I feel like altruistic kidney donors get like a really bad rap because we're always like talking about it. But it's like, oh my God, like, did you know you could do this? Like, I didn't know I could do this. The only reason I knew I could do it was some other stupid altruistic donor did it and told me. Like, it never would have crossed my mind you could give a kidney to a stranger. Like, where would I have gotten the idea from if other donors hadn't like, you know, been so open and like vulnerable and sharing their own stories and all the ways that they did. So even before the film was done, I mean, I had shared a couple things about my experience on various like social media and like different people responded at that stage. And I knew about 3 people who donated like even then. So like there's no, that was never a question. Like it doesn't take like almost no one in that room wants to do this, and that's fine because it doesn't actually take that many like out of 100 people to like think, oh, maybe I could do that. Maybe I'll look into that, or like, you know, tell another person. So yeah, so I always knew that was gonna happen. And as you see from the film, like I kind of take that for granted and I don't spend really any time trying to convince you that you should do it because I just didn't want to make that kind of film. Like I'm not trying to convince anyone of anything like at all. And in fact, it makes me very uncomfortable to put myself in like an activist position. It's not a role that I feel suited for or comfortable in at all. Like I'm just like, aren't these interesting dilemmas? Let's go think about them.
I
That's
know
more my
people in
thing.
I know people in the audience want to ask some questions, but if I could ask you
Sure.
one question, um, did you have any concerns at all that maybe some of your honesty about some of your reactions to what it was like to go to the hospital, and that you didn't have those moments of extreme happiness right after the surgery that you thought maybe you would? Were you
Mm.
nervous at all that maybe it would discourage any people from doing it?
No, only in the sense that I thought people might think, God, she's such an annoying whiner. Like, I don't want to be in the same club as her. Like, and I'm being sincere. Like, that was the concern. Like, I didn't want to make like the anonymous donor like so unappealing that you would just never want to be associated with her. Again, I wasn't, the only thing that we struggled with was there used to be like a scene that tried to quantify some statistics, like chances of death and surgery, whatever. And like those numbers were just too contested. And like the numbers were so across the board. Like if I say, your chances of dying are 1 in 14,000, that sounds like very small, but then other numbers that seem just as valid were saying 1 in 1,000. And I was like, I can't include any of these because I'm not comfortable just including a number. And I even tried to make a scene that explored like the confusion around the numbers. And I was like, people are just going to remember the worst number. I'm not going to put any numbers in because I did not trust that I had like the answer because it's very complicated. Like it sounds like an easy question, like how many people die as a result of getting a kidney, but it turns out that like the way that you answer the question and how you like figure out that data, like if I died tomorrow, like when I go down, it's like, what if I got really depressed? Like again, I don't know. I don't think anyway. So that's the only thing I really worried about was there was a point where I had some like numbers and I felt like they felt discouraging or too encouraging because maybe they were wrong in the other direction. I just didn't trust any of the numbers.
I appreciate your honesty in the film. I think people find that refreshing, that it wasn't preachy or anything like that. We're going to open up some
Thank you.
questions now.
Great.
Over there.
Unless I missed it, did Penny ever meet the person she donated her kidney to?
Could you hear that question?
I
Penny?
did, yeah. So no, I never met my recipient. I donated specifically anonymously from the beginning, and I never wanted to meet my recipient. At some point, kind of late in the process, I realized that, well, what if the recipient wanted to meet me? Like, would I be, like, am I precluding something that someone else might get some value out of? And so I thought, well, I could leave it open on my end. So I told the transplant center that like if the recipient wanted to send me a card or be in touch or whatever, they could be. But now it's been 4 years. So I think I'm pretty sure, unless this movie turns into like a runaway hit and everyone's on the hunt to find my recipient, I'm probably not going to hear from them, which is fine by me because I really was trying to like do this anonymous donation and just spare someone else the incredible, complicated, like loaded, like how do you like appropriately thank someone for that? It just feels like such a burden to put on somebody. Like, just let it be free and clear. No thanks required.
Wow.
Right over there.
Hi, Penny. First off, I never for a moment, personally speaking, ever felt in the slightest way that you were proselytizing the virtues of donating, nor even of being a good Samaritan. And to say that you are brave and courageous is an extreme understatement. Very, very, very taken by everything that you've done through this journey. 2 questions. First question, what did Penny Lane learn about Penny Lane intrinsically through this whole
Mhm.
process? And I'll just leave it at that. Thank you very much for this film.
That's a good enough question to be 2 questions. Thank you. And thanks for saying that. That's very, very gratifying to hear. I feel like what I learned about myself is that, like the stories you tell yourself about who you are like they have a lot of meaning, and you can like make choices about what those stories are to some extent. And I felt like I was like watching myself make this film and I was like coming to understand that there was like a story that I had where everyone else is like kind of normal and the same, and they all understand each other, and they're all at a party probably right now that they didn't invite me to. And that I'm over here on the other side of that window and I'm all alone and I'm like so isolated and I'm so, individual. And I think that that is like so not true. And it's also interesting that that is a story that I feel about my life. And I know that I felt that way my whole life. Like that's like a story that I could have told you in like second grade when everyone else was talking about New Kids on the Block. And I was like, they're not good. And then I had no friends. Like I was like, what happened? Like, I don't understand. So there's something inside of me that's like very conflicted about wanting to fit in, but also like hating the idea of fitting in and like not wanting to be normal and also wanting to be normal. And like, you know, that there's something where like, I tend to think everyone else has it all figured out. And I am just over here like, what? I'm so strange and confused. But I think I learned that about myself, and that also that I was really, again, and I say this in the film, just like I'm really hard on myself in ways that feel very confusing, like worth analyzing. Like, why did I spend my whole kidney donation journey chastising myself that I wasn't doing it better? Like, that's kind of weird. It's kind of a weird thing to do. And I don't think if I hadn't made the film, I would have realized that I had done that was even an option. Like, people just walk around like thinking nice things about themselves to themselves. Like I just like I can't even like fathom that. I could go on, but we should go to the next question.
Oh, okay. Is that a question? No. Oh. Well, Penny, this is Kelly again. I have a question. Two questions.
Hi, Kelly.
One, do you see a kind of through line through your work in terms of the kind of perspective that you bring to life about that feeling of not really, you know, like you said, feeling on the outside and not really, you know, all of your films are very different in their subjects. This one was very personal. And
Yeah.
then my second question is a really easy one. What are you doing next, and how can we support your next project?
So the first question, I used to struggle a lot with trying to find like through lines through all the project, you know, because again, like they are really different. Like it's not, it is a little challenging. I do think that like there's a way that I look at things that might have like an element of kind of existentialist, like absurdism at the heart of it, where you're just kind of like, at some point, like I don't take things that seriously. Like, you know what I mean? Like at some point you just have to be like, this is a lot of nothing. Like, what is even going on? Like, what's going on? Why am I so upset about all these details about like, you know, so there's kind of like that I feel like might be in a lot of the work, but I also feel like, I tend to like, I guess I can only say what drives me, and like, I'm just looking to be surprised. Like, if you think about all the things an artist might be looking for or looking to like do for their audience or do with their audience through art, like there's a long list of things you could say, like outrage, you know, enlighten, inspire, you know, represent, like think about all the verbs that like a director could have in relationship to what they're trying to do. And I think I'm trying to provoke, and I'm trying to be delighted, and I'm trying to be surprised. And so I don't know if that's like a perspective, but I do know that those things form the core of like what is guiding me through like every step of the process, from like starting a project through the very end. It's like, what's surprising, what's delightful, and like what's provoking me in some way, like confusing me or challenging maybe something I thought I knew, maybe I don't know it so well, you know, that kind of thing. I like to be surprised. I don't actually think everyone wants to be surprised when they're, to be honest. Seems like you would think that, but I don't think that. I just like always want to be like, wow, I didn't know that. Like I thought a Satanist was this other thing, like who knew, you know, and like, oh, I don't want to tell other people. They'll probably also be surprised, you know, or I was surprised that my kidney donation journey like looked like what it looked like, you know, like I did think it would be different. And I did think there would be like more of a red carpet. And I did think I would like float through it and be like, I'm so self-satisfied. I'm just floating around on like a cloud of self-regard. None of that happened. What am I working on now? I'm wrapping up a new music documentary for HBO. It's about children's music. It's like the most fun ever. I spent the last year hanging out with all different adults who choose professionally to make music for toddlers. So 0 through 5 is the age range that I was interested in. So I spent the last year going to like Wiggles concerts and like listening to Raffi, and it's just been like very healing, like really sweet. And that'll be out probably early next year on HBO. And then I had this film actually we have a theatrical release at the end of June at DCTV. June 28th, I think, is the date. It's the last weekend in June. And so it's opening then, and then it's actually going to be on, no one knows this yet, so keep it in your hats. Like really, actually, I probably shouldn't be telling you. It'll be on Netflix later this year. So tell all your friends to watch it. But not yet, because that's not official news. But this film, like, you know, it's been a long journey from the premiere at South by Southwest last March to get to a place where like we're putting it in theaters, we're like getting it out there, it's going up with streaming, and we're just so happy. It's been like a long time coming. So I'm happy that this film's finally going to be seen by more people.
Well, we're really happy that we got a chance to see it with you, and we're all sworn to secrecy, right? Right?
Yes. Oh my God. I'm so being sincere right now. My producer, I feel like he can like hear me and he's so mad at me.
You can trust all of us, and we're way
Okay,
out on
good.
Long Island, right?
Yeah. The news will spread slow.
That's right. That's right. So Penny, one more round of applause for Penny. Thank you.
Thanks, Penny.
Thank you. Thanks, guys. Nice to see you all. Thanks for coming.
Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.